Moved for work, and so it's always been very temporary, where I lived in Chelsea, New York for a while, and then I lived in Atlanta, Georgia for a while, and now I've been here for a week and a half, and I'll be here for 6 months.
He didn't even direct it, and yet somehow, she acts as though she single-handedly reinvented Snow White. The truth is, she had nothing to do with the creation of the story. Her only job was to bring it to life on screen. Instead, she turned every press interview into a lecture. People began saying, just do the job, play the role. Stop preaching. Across social media, a growing number of fans, even lifelong Disney supporters, voiced frustration. On the cultural battlefield of modern Hollywood, Snow White became another lightning rod, and Rachel Zegler found herself at the center of a storm. Many Americans, especially those who once adored Disney's fairy tales, simply couldn't stand the new tone or the person leading it. As criticism mounted, calls for a boycott echoed across YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter. Parents who grew up with the 1937 classic were suddenly telling others not to let their kids watch this remake. No matter how much your children love Snow White, don't give Disney your money, one viral post declared. And perhaps the most controversial change of all, Disney's decision to get rid of the dwarfs entirely. In their place came a group of magical creatures, only one of whom was an actual dwarf. What was meant to be progressive instead felt regressive to many. Dwarfism advocates argued that Disney had erased an entire form of representation, not to mention 7 potential roles for actors who rarely get them. As one critic put it, "You didn't move forward, you went backward." Actor Peter Dinklage had previously warned Disney about this exact issue. He said there's power in putting people with dwarfism on camera, especially in a massive global production. It's not about mocking the old fairy tale, it's about visibility, respect, and opportunity. If the story is offensive, he said, then change the story. Don't erase the people. Those words now echo louder than ever, as fans and advocacy groups continue to question what Disney actually stands for. Then there's the movie's reimagined tone. Gone are the gentle charms and innocent romance. In their place are long monologues about independence, social justice, and equality. Even the famous poisoned apple scene has been rewritten into a kind of moral sermon. "This is no ordinary apple, my dear. It's a magic wishing apple," the witch says. But instead of a wish for love, the heroine replies with a speech about dismantling the patriarchy and building a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable world. She ends with, "I will become the leader I know I can be. All shall love me and despair." What once felt magical now feels like a political statement, and that shift has left audiences divided. Off-screen, Rachel Zegler hasn't helped her own cause. In interviews, she's been quoted saying, "I deserve to be paid for every hour that movie is streamed online. I stood in that dress for 18 hours a day." Critics were quick to pounce. "Are you really struggling to pay your bills, Rachel?" one commentator asked sarcastically. "Did Spielberg not pay you for West Side Story? Did Disney shortchange you?" To many, her comments reinforced the stereotype of an entitled Hollywood star out of touch with ordinary people's lives. Once hailed as Disney's next Golden Girl, Rachel's image has since crumbled. She's gone from being praised for her breakout performance to becoming one of the most criticized actresses of her generation. And while she insists that the backlash has gone too far, "I can be having the greatest time and still wish people would stop sending me death threats," she said. The damage may already be done. Online critics have branded her one of the worst casting choices in modern movie history, claiming she's unstable, self-righteous, and disconnected from reality. Now, according to multiple reports, Rachel is desperately trying to regain control of her public image. Insiders allege she's been pressuring Fox to cancel or heavily censor an upcoming episode of The Simpsons that ruthlessly mocks her Snow White remake. The parody reportedly paints her as Rachel Zed, an out-of-touch, self-important celebrity who turns a beloved fairy tale into a chaotic, self-serving lecture. Rather than laugh it off, Rachel is said to be furious, viewing the satire as a personal attack, and, more importantly, as a direct threat to her career. Behind the scenes, those close to her claim she's panicking, worried that this portrayal might permanently cement her reputation as Hollywood's latest cautionary tale. Despite her emotional interviews, public apologies, and repeated claims of being misunderstood, the truth is clear: her fight is no longer about Snow White, it's about survival in an industry that can turn on you overnight. Those close to Rachel Zegler say she's more anxious than ever. Behind the bright lights and polished smiles, sources describe a young actress who fully understands the magnitude of what's coming. According to insiders, Rachel believes that once the Simpsons episode airs, the damage will be irreversible. The parody won't just be a passing joke, it'll become permanently attached to her name. In her mind, this isn't merely about satire, it's about survival. A single viral episode could cement her as a Hollywood punchline, rather than the rising star she once was. And in an era where internet culture can define reputations overnight, Rachel fears that this caricature of her will outlive the real version. The fear seems to be consuming her. Friends say she's been distant, more private, more cautious. And then came her sudden disappearance, a move that sent shockwaves through both fans and the industry. Only days after news of The Simpsons parody leaked, and following months of relentless online ridicule, Rachel reportedly boarded a plane bound for Colombia. Officially, her representatives called it a personal trip, a quiet getaway to recharge and focus on herself. But few in Hollywood are convinced that's the full story. The timing, critics note, feels far too convenient, almost as if she's trying to vanish before the next storm hits. Her social media blackout hasn't helped ease suspicions. Once known for her constant online engagement, Rachel has gone completely silent. No posts, no stories, no replies, not even a simple update for her millions of followers. Her interviews have been quietly canceled, red carpet appearances withdrawn, and her management team has refused to release any official statements. The result has been a vacuum of information, which the internet quickly filled with rumor and speculation. Is she retreating from the spotlight to let the backlash die down? Is she hiding from potential legal trouble involving Disney contracts? Or is this an intentional pause? A chance to reset her image before attempting a redemption arc? No one knows for sure, but the optics, as one Hollywood insider put it, look like someone running from the wreckage. Meanwhile, over in Burbank, the atmosphere at Disney's headquarters has reportedly turned tense and chaotic. Executives who once championed Snow White as a groundbreaking billion-dollar reimagining are now watching in disbelief as the project crumbles. What was supposed to be a celebration of inclusivity and modern storytelling has instead turned into one of Disney's most public disasters in recent history. Sources inside the company describe emergency meetings, internal blame games, and an air of frustration that's rarely seen from a studio famous for its control and polish. One insider summed it up, "Disney doesn't do messy, but this is messy. Messy." In one resurfaced interview clip, Rachel attempted to remind audiences of the story's message. Audiences walk away from this film with an understanding of the true meaning of fairness, she said, her voice calm but strained. Fairness is about what's within, your heart, your kindness, how you treat others. It has nothing to do with what you look like. Her words, meant to be inspiring, landed awkwardly online. Critics mocked the tone as overly rehearsed, and fans accused her of trying to rewrite the film's narrative after the backlash. What was once meant to be a message of hope began to sound like scripted damage control. Behind closed doors, the situation may be even worse than the public realizes. Sources close to Disney's legal department suggest that the studio is considering serious action under its standard morality clauses. These clauses, often buried in Hollywood contracts, give studios the right to withhold bonuses or even demand repayment if an actor's conduct harms the company's reputation. In Rachel's case, insiders say Disney could be exploring these clauses to recoup part of the massive financial losses surrounding Snow White. Some estimates place the total damage at around $350 million, factoring in production costs, marketing, and lost revenue from canceled partnerships. The numbers are staggering. The film's budget reportedly hit $300 million before marketing. And despite the massive push, early audience reactions have been brutal. Review aggregators list scores as low as 2 out of 10 on IMDb, with critics calling the film directionless, soulless, and painfully confused. Industry analysts describe it as a textbook example of corporate overreach, a movie torn between being a heartfelt fairy tale and a self-conscious social statement. One cultural critic put it bluntly, "Hollywood keeps trying to modernize old legends, but in the process, they forget why people loved them in the first place." Disney, a company famous for managing controversy with precision and grace, now finds itself facing one of the loudest public meltdowns in its modern history. Leaks from inside the studio reveal deep divisions, executives frustrated by creative missteps, PR teams overwhelmed by the internet's hostility, and marketing departments unsure how to salvage a brand now synonymous with failure. For decades, Disney's magic has been its ability to turn every setback into a comeback. But this time, even the most loyal insiders are quietly admitting that the spell might be broken. And perhaps the saddest part is how promising it all began. When Rachel Zegler first landed the role of Snow White, the excitement was electric. She was fresh off an acclaimed performance in West Side Story, personally selected by Steven Spielberg himself. The industry hailed her as Disney's new Golden Girl, talented, charismatic, and perfectly positioned to lead the next generation of live-action fairy tales. There were magazine covers, glowing interviews, and fan excitement that rivaled the biggest casting announcements of the decade. Yet within 2 years, that golden narrative unraveled. What began as a dream opportunity has turned into a nightmare case study of fame, backlash, and the unforgiving power of modern media. What once promised to be a fairy tale comeback for Disney now reads more like a modern tragedy, one where the princess didn't need a poisoned apple to fall from grace. Just a few viral clips, a divisive message, and a public growing weary of Hollywood's attempts to lecture rather than enchant. But the magic began to fade almost as soon as the Snow White press tour kicked off. What should have been a joyous celebration of Disney nostalgia quickly turned into a slow-motion PR disaster. Instead of paying tribute to the timeless legacy of one of Disney's most beloved classics, Rachel Zegler's interviews were laced with sarcasm, dismissiveness, and a kind of restless boredom that rubbed people the wrong way. The young actress, once hailed as Disney's next golden star, seemed to be biting the very hand that had lifted her into the spotlight. In one now infamous clip, Rachel leaned back in her chair smirking as she described the original 1937 version as weird and outdated. She laughed while calling the prince a stalker, her tone dripping with mockery. "I mean, you know," she said, "the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah, weird. So we didn't do that this time." What was meant to sound confident and progressive came across as arrogant and dismissive. The room laughed politely, but online, no one was amused. Within hours, the clip went viral. Fans who had grown up with the original film accused her of disrespecting Disney history. Comment sections filled with angry posts, memes, and calls to boycott the movie. Some pointed out that Rachel wasn't just criticizing an old fairy tale, she was ridiculing the very foundation of the character she was being paid millions to portray. For a studio built on nostalgia and family magic, this was the worst kind of publicity imaginable. "You could almost hear the enthusiasm die," one Disney insider said. People were excited for the movie, until Rachel started talking. Instead of promoting the film as a modern update to a cherished story, she made it sound like a cynical reboot meant to tear down everything that made Snow White special in the first place. Online critics began piling on, describing her as the least genuine, most out-of-touch person in Hollywood. One viral comment read, "Snow White flopped. Who's surprised? You cast someone who hates the story and made the villain Gal Gadot, the only person people actually like." And indeed, the so-called Snow White controversy had officially begun, with Rachel Zegler at the epicenter of the storm. Every word she said seemed to ignite a new wave of backlash. What could have been a career-defining moment, a chance to embody a beloved Disney princess, was quickly spiraling into a case study in how not to handle a press tour. To make matters worse, the awkward dynamic between Rachel and her co-star, Gal Gadot, only fueled the gossip further. What should have been a warm, sisterly partnership between two leading ladies turned into one of the coldest PR duos Hollywood had seen in years. On red carpets, their smiles looked forced. In interviews, the energy between them was stiff and distant. Fans noticed it immediately. Reporters noticed it too. And soon, headlines were speculating about an on-set rift between Snow White and her evil queen. One journalist described their joint appearances as professional but icy. The tension was especially visible at major events, where Rachel often spoke over Gadot or avoided eye contact altogether. At the Oscars, when the two appeared together on stage to present the award for Best Visual Effects, the chill between them was almost palpable. Gone were the friendly glances and easy laughter that co-stars usually share, replaced instead with stiff posture, minimal interaction, and smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes.
Viewers here at the show, so thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate this.
Thank you for having me. I can't even. This is crazy.
All right, good. I'm excited.
Behind the scenes, insiders whispered that Gal Gadot, a seasoned veteran of blockbuster press tours, was deliberately keeping her distance. "She's smart," one source said. "She's not going to get dragged into someone else's PR meltdown. Gal knows how Hollywood works. She's staying polite, but she's staying away. That quiet separation didn't go unnoticed. Fans picked up on it immediately, and social media lit up with side-by-side photos comparing their chemistry, or lack thereof, at different events. The internet quickly turned their strained appearances into memes, captions like "Two queens, zero chemistry" trending on X and TikTok. Entertainment blogs ran headlines like "Frozen, the real story behind Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot's icy red carpet moments." Even journalists who had initially defended Rachel's outspoken nature began to change their tone. What had once been framed as youthful honesty now looked like hubris. And as if the public tension wasn't enough, the film's performance made things even worse. Reviewers savaged it. Audiences mocked it. Critics described it as a tone-deaf remake nobody asked for. One anchor put it bluntly on live television. "Alex, what's been the reaction to Disney's latest expensive own goal?" The correspondent didn't hesitate. "Well, the reaction has been absolutely horrible. It's the worst box office for a Disney live-action remake in the studio's history." The fairy tale that began with such promise had turned into a slow-motion disaster. For Rachel Zegler, what should have been her coronation as Disney royalty was now being remembered as one of the most spectacular PR collapses in modern Hollywood history. A reminder that even the fairest of them all can fall, and that sometimes the real curse isn't a poisoned apple, but your own words. I mean, they're projected to lose somewhere between $200 and $400 million on this film, a number so enormous, it's hard to wrap your head around. For Disney, a company once synonymous with box office dominance, this isn't just a financial misfire, it's a symbolic failure. What was supposed to be a proud celebration of an enduring fairy tale, a tribute to the magic that built their empire, has instead become a masterclass in how to alienate your most loyal audience. The irony is painful. Snow White was meant to reintroduce a generation to the film that started it all, a story about innocence, love, and wonder. Instead, it morphed into a public relations disaster before the movie even hit theaters. Rachel's offhand remarks about the original film's stalker prince and outdated themes might have seemed harmless in the moment, but they planted seeds of resentment that grew into a full-blown boycott movement. Fans didn't just disagree, they felt betrayed. Then came the silence. Rachel Zegler's sudden disappearance to Colombia, no interviews, no social media engagement, no clarification, left a vacuum that critics eagerly filled. Rumors began to swirl. Was she hiding from the backlash? Was Disney forcing her into the background? Her PR team, once confident, now seemed completely lost, trying to contain a wildfire that refused to die down. Every passing week without a public statement made it worse. The internet thrives on speculation, and Rachel's silence became a story in itself. Behind closed doors, Disney executives were panicking. Meetings stretched late into the night as they tried to limit the financial bleeding. Marketing budgets were quietly slashed, promotional campaigns were pulled, and Rachel's name was subtly removed from official Disney press materials. Insiders leaked that the studio had canceled all of Rachel's upcoming interviews and appearances, effectively freezing her out of her own movie's promotion. The message was clear: Disney wanted to move on. And as Disney scrambled to pick up the pieces, the entertainment world moved forward. Brutally. While Snow White limped along, another film stormed into theaters and completely stole the spotlight. Minecraft, the movie became an unstoppable force, shattering box office projections with an incredible $300 million global opening weekend. Theaters were packed. Families filled every row. Kids screamed with excitement. TikTok showed overflowing cinemas where the audience was chanting, laughing, celebrating. Meanwhile, Snow White screenings painted a depressing picture. Empty seats, silent rooms, projection lights shining across half-filled theaters. One viral tweet said it best: "I went to see Snow White, and it felt like a funeral for Disney." By the end of its theatrical run, Snow White had barely scraped past $77 million worldwide, a catastrophic number for a film that cost hundreds of millions to make and promote. Social media was merciless. Memes comparing Minecraft's record-breaking crowds to Snow White's empty aisles spread like wildfire. On Reddit, users joked that Snow White had achieved invisibility magic. TikTok showed Minecraft fans celebrating while someone edited in footage of deserted Disney theaters. It wasn't just a flop, it became a cultural punchline. For Disney, it wasn't only about lost money, it was about lost reputation. The studio that once represented timeless storytelling had stumbled into ideological warfare, and Rachel Zegler was right at the heart of it. Her outspoken interviews, her perceived arrogance, and her refusal to back down turned her into a lightning rod for controversy. The public narrative shifted from Disney's next rising star to Hollywood's most out-of-touch actress. Even within Hollywood circles, whispers began to grow louder. Producers and executives reportedly viewed Rachel as radioactive, a liability no one wanted to touch. Her activism, once admired, was now being described as career cancer. For the first time, insiders were openly speculating whether her name might quietly vanish from future Disney projects altogether. And as all of this unfolded, The Simpsons were reportedly preparing a parody episode, one that insiders say mocks the Snow White remake and Rachel's own media meltdown. If that episode airs, it could serve as the final nail in the coffin, a satirical eulogy for both her career and Disney's once untouchable fairy tale brand. Now, as weeks turn into months, the question hanging over Hollywood is simple yet haunting. Can Rachel Zegler recover from this? Or will she go down as a cautionary tale? The star who turned Disney's dream into a nightmare and vanished when the world stopped applauding. She wasn't just disliked, she had become toxic to anyone who might have been remotely interested in the film. The moment Rachel Zegler opened her mouth in interviews or media appearances, the spark of curiosity that might have drawn audiences in instantly fizzled. There was a unique kind of negativity that followed her words. The confidence that once charmed directors and casting agents now came across as arrogance and self-importance, turning potential fans into critics before they even saw the movie. Instead of being the beacon of Disney's new era, she had inadvertently positioned herself as a barrier, a filter that pushed away audiences who could have enjoyed Snow White. Every press tour, every casual comment seemed to reinforce a growing narrative that this wasn't just a remake of a classic story. It was the public unraveling of Rachel Zegler's persona and reputation in real time. Enter The Simpsons, television's sharpest and most merciless commentator on pop culture. For decades, Springfield has served as a mirror, reflecting Hollywood's absurdities back at the public with unflinching humor. And when the writers set their sights on Rachel and Disney's controversial remake, they did not hold back. In the upcoming episode, the show introduces Snow Woke, the reimagining, a fictional in-show film that doesn't simply lampoon the project, it lays waste to it in every possible way. The parody is vicious in its precision. Princes are banned outright, the dwarfs are deleted entirely, and the animated version of Rachel lectures an increasingly bewildered and frustrated group of villagers for the entirety of the film, pontificating on systemic oppression, inequity, and moral lessons nobody asked for. There's no subtlety, no sly wink. It's a blistering indictment of the way both Rachel and Disney mismanaged one of the most beloved stories in cinematic history, and it's impossible to watch without wincing. For Rachel, the parody isn't just a humorous jab. It's a primetime obituary of her career, written in unmistakable bright yellow ink for millions to see. The episode broadcasts what critics, fans, and industry insiders had been whispering, that her public persona had become incompatible with the role she was supposed to embody. Overnight, her name was tied to a memified, satirical version of herself, one whose moralistic, preachy take on Snow White was amplified to absurd proportions. Hollywood noticed immediately. Studios that once clamored to work with Rachel, buoyed by the success of West Side Story and her rising star power, reportedly went silent. Casting calls she had been rumored to headline quietly vanished, with projects moving forward with other names attached. Publicly, there were no explanations. Privately, the message was unmistakable. Rachel Zegler had become a brand risk. It wasn't just the failure of Snow White. It was her entire public image that now carried the baggage of controversy, mockery, and audience disdain. In a world where a leading actress can make or break a multi-hundred-million-dollar production, studios increasingly hesitated to invest in someone whose presence alone could spark viral backlash and PR catastrophes before a single trailer was released. The irony was stark. Disney had hired someone whose public persona seemed almost deliberately antithetical to the role of Snow White, a self-described girl boss, outspoken, fiercely opinionated, and unafraid to mock the very story she was cast to bring to life. One insider described the perception bluntly. They hired the most insufferable, narcissistic person imaginable to play the ultimate fairy tale princess. She hates Snow White, and it shows. The casting, which might have seemed like a bold, modern choice on paper, became the textbook example of how public image and personal branding could clash catastrophically with audience expectations. As memes multiplied and satirical commentary spread across social media, Rachel's humiliation went far beyond any traditional measure of box office failure. The Simpsons parody became shorthand for her entire controversy, a cultural symbol of everything that went wrong in both the film and her approach to promotion. Even the show's meta-commentary couldn't resist highlighting the irony. The character wasn't called Snow White at all, but Snow Woke, emphasizing that fairness of skin was irrelevant, and that Rachel's missteps had overshadowed the timeless magic the story was supposed to convey. By the time the parody aired, Rachel Zegler's trajectory in Hollywood had shifted dramatically. What was once a career full of opportunity and buzz now seemed precarious and uncertain. The public perception had transformed her from a rising star into a cautionary tale, the symbol of how quickly success could unravel when talent, temperament, and messaging collide in a hyper-visible, online-driven culture. No studio wanted to risk hundreds of millions on a lead actress who might alienate audiences, become a lightning rod for criticism, or inspire viral mockery before the cameras even rolled. In just a few short months, she had gone from the promise of Disney's next Golden Girl to the face of a cautionary tale about ambition, hubris, and the perils of modern celebrity. The irony, as industry insiders quietly acknowledged, was that she had managed to make herself both the storyteller and the villain of her own narrative. A bright star consumed by the very spotlight that once elevated her. Instead of being remembered for her talent or her rise as a promising young actress, Rachel Zegler's public persona had been entirely rewritten by a combination of controversy, online frenzy, and sheer cultural spectacle. Rather than being associated with the timeless magic of Disney and the nostalgia of Snow White, her image became synonymous with surviving a metaphorical, and at times very literal, snowstorm of ridicule and missteps. The layers of bizarre twists surrounding her career became almost surreal. One of the most striking examples occurred when a fake AI-generated OnlyFans account using her likeness exploded across the internet. Thousands of users flocked to it within hours, convinced it was authentic. Rachel herself had nothing to do with it, but the very fact that people accepted it as real reflected just how far her image had plummeted from the wholesome Disney princess ideal she had once represented. The innocence of her early career had been replaced by a chaotic, meme-ready caricature of herself, one that the online community eagerly dissected, shared, and ridiculed. The cultural reaction was as immediate as it was merciless. Memes and social media posts proliferated overnight, highlighting her perceived arrogance, missteps, and disconnection from audiences. Clips of her interviews were spliced into parodies, with captions mocking her lectures on feminism, social issues, and modernized storytelling. People weren't just criticizing her performance. They were publicly rewriting her persona in ways that made her a symbol of Hollywood miscalculation, an object lesson in how fame and personal branding could collide catastrophically. Every joke, meme, and viral post chipped away at the public perception of Rachel as a rising star, slowly transforming her into a cautionary tale. And then came the apex of her cultural humiliation, the Simpsons episode, which finally aired and solidified her position as a pop culture punchline. In Snow Woke, the reimagining, Springfield residents mercilessly mocked the parody version of Rachel, depicting a character who spent the entire film lecturing bored villagers about systemic oppression, rewriting the story, and eliminating beloved elements such as princes and dwarfs. Musical numbers were inserted purely to pad runtime, but they did little to salvage the film's narrative. Critics called them unnecessary and atrocious, and audiences agreed. Even songs as iconic as Someday My Prince Will Come were deleted and replaced with politically charged, modernized alternatives that felt forced, heavy-handed, and tone-deaf. The parody's treatment of race, gender, class, and power dynamics was described as overly didactic, lacking subtlety or charm, leaving viewers exhausted and rolling their eyes rather than enchanted. The townspeople in the cartoon yawned, booed, and eventually walked out, a clear visual metaphor for the audience's reaction in the real world. Being mocked by The Simpsons in this way is more than just entertainment commentary. It's a cultural death knell. In modern Hollywood, crossing this threshold signals that controversy has become spectacle. You are no longer simply a headline, you are the joke itself, immortalized in a show watched by millions and endlessly referenced across the internet. For Rachel, whose early career had been carefully scripted like a fairy tale, this represented the ultimate symbolic end. Her rise, once framed as effortless talent and charm, now seemed like a cautionary lesson about arrogance, poor judgment, and the merciless scrutiny of the internet. Despite this, the possibility of redemption still exists. Hollywood is littered with stories of fallen stars clawing their way back. But for Rachel, the bar has been raised higher than ever before. Her next move will have to be not just good, but flawless, executed with precision in every interview, appearance, and performance. In an era where image is currency, hers has been shattered, dissected, repurposed, and memeified beyond recognition. The public isn't waiting to see her next film. They are waiting to witness whether she can survive the cultural storm that Snow White unleashed, a storm now immortalized by Springfield's unforgiving satire. Every viral clip, every meme, every frame of the parody is a permanent reminder that fame can evaporate as quickly as it arrives, and that in modern entertainment, a single misstep can rewrite your entire narrative. For Rachel Zegler, the storm isn't over. It's now part of her legacy, and only her next choices will determine whether she emerges from the chaos or is consigned to the cautionary tales of Hollywood history.